Okay, my name is Julie Pearson Little Thunder with the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program at Oklahoma State University, and I'm interviewing Wes Studi for the Chilocco Alumni Association here at Chilocco Indian School outside of Newkirk. Wes, you're well known to many people for your film and theater work, and we're here today talking about your experiences at Chilocco and serving in the Army during the Vietnam War. Thank you for talking with me.
I think it's going to be my pleasure. I'm not sure. We'll see, won't we?
We'll see. Where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in northeastern Oklahoma, somewhere between Tahlequah and Stillwell, Oklahoma, an area called Nofire Hollow, if you will. It's near Rocky Mountain and Mankiller Flats area. That's where I was born.
And what about you? What did your folks do for a living?
Well, initially what they did was they farmed, is what they did, and sort of subsistence hunting and farming, and then traded for and bought, or certain staples of whatever you had to buy back in the day. And that was essentially it. After that, my mother worked cleaning houses while my dad he worked in that day they called him ranch hands, but he was a ranch worker. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How
about brothers or sisters?
I had 3 brothers. Now have 2 brothers. We had one. We lost one a number of years ago. But the 3 of us remain, and I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico. I have one brother who lives in Nashville, Tennessee, and then another brother who is still near the home compound in Collinsville, Oklahoma.
What was your exposure to Cherokee language and culture growing up?
My exposure, if you will, was actually, I was inundated by Cherokee culture and Cherokee language. I didn't learn to speak English until I went to school in Muskogee, Oklahoma, first grade when I was 5.5 years old. I went there, God, it would have been sometime in the 50s, I suppose. And I did the first and second grades at a small orphanage, if you will, called Murrow Home, I think it's called. It's located right near Bacone College outside of Muskogee, because my aunt convinced the family that I needed a better education than what I would receive at Hungry Mountain, which was the little rural school that I would have attended like the rest of the family, were it not for my Aunt Jane, who said that he could get a better education if he were to go live at this little Murrow home and be transported back and forth into public school in Muskogee. So I guess the family agreed, and one day they came and got me and shipped me off to Murrow home, and within the year I had learned how to speak English. I don't remember the process. I really don't remember how that came about, but by the end of that year I could speak English. And I went home and tried speaking English there, and no one in the household was having it. No, we're not speaking English in this house. Who do you think you are? So I had to relearn Cherokee again. So within that summer I relearned, and then they sent me back for the second grade to that same place, Murrow Home and school in Muskogee. So that's when I became bilingual.
How did being at Murrow impact you? What were your feelings about being there?
I don't really remember a whole lot about it. I was, just right at 5.5 years old whenever I started there. And my most vivid memories of it all were at one point in time, we had out on the playground outside of our dorms, one of those, what was known then as a monkey bar. It's just a straight bar that you swing on, right? Mm-hmm. And what we would do was put up a like old wicker chair outside furniture kind of, so we could swing that monkey bar, let it swing, and at some point when it was close, we would jump on it, right? Jump on it and go swinging from that old lawn chair of sorts. And I was out there one day and swung it like that, and then I kind of looked away, and at the same time somebody came along and did something, because when I looked back to grab the bar, it had turned and it hit me right in the head. Bonk.
Oh my God.
So I still have the scar on my head from that experience, and I remember that vividly. But almost, you know, the process of learning English, I don't remember all that well. I don't know how it came about, but it came about. And it was a kind of a different lifestyle in that I learned that was my first viewing of television.
Okay.
And I also learned that it was, it generates electricity. The screen, those old screens, you know, they had in the den they had a television wherein after school we would come back in, and there were times when not everybody went in there to watch TV. One time I came back and I noticed I was the only one I could go watch. And I had been watching this one program wherein I really began to like this woman on this program, and I thought, and I had seen pictures, images of these characters kissing sometimes, and I thought, wow, this is exciting, I wonder. So I looked all around, snuck up to the television. I got real close when her face came on, and I went, what? And I see this shot from the screen like that. But just about at that time, somebody walked in and saw me. Oh my God! I think I almost got in trouble over that. So, what's wrong with you trying to kiss a television?
Oh, that's a great story.
But that's one of my memories there, and you know, I was introduced to dorm life, right? Mm-hmm. It's a different kind of way to live from the family, but that's essentially my memories of Murrow home. Yes.
So, how did you land at Chilocco?
You know, my dad came here. In fact, last night I just met JT, is his name, can't think of his last name right now, but he played music with Andy here. Back in the day. He came up to me and he said, my name is so-and-so, and I used to play with Andy. You know Andy Studi? I said, yeah, he raised me. I told him, man. Oh, well, I'll be darned. And she said, I used to play music with him, played guitar in a band here. And it made me think, oh, and they used to sing a song like, roly-poly, daddy's little fatty, hungry every minute of the day. And he said, yeah, we did that, he said. Along with good night, Irene, good night, Irene. I'll see you in my dreams.
And you were, all three of you, musically inclined. Had you started your band yet before coming to Chilocco, or not?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I was totally unmusically
that would happen
inclined
later.
at that time. That
okay.
happened later on.
That happened later.
I think a huge influence of what at that time was that I really enjoyed Sunday mornings when Andy would get up and Mom would be cooking breakfast, and then he'd always grab up his guitar and start doing those old songs, you know, sitting around, sing some songs like that. And Mom would say, "The food's getting cold." You can picture that, right? The food's getting cold. Get in here. But yeah.
So coming to Chilocco, you knew that Andy'd come here.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, this was in the 50s. Or, no, just, well, right out of the 50s and the 60s. And during those days, it was financially difficult for the amount of money that he made in order to feed 4 kids. It was difficult, and that was actually one consideration. And the better consideration was that he had told lots of stories about, you know, what kind of fun he had up here going to school, and you know, with the music and all of that, having had a lot of great experiences up here, and it made me think, wow, you know, I'd like to do that. So it was at about the time I graduated 8th grade. In those days, there was no graduation of 8th grade. You simply moved from 8th to 9th grade. But you also had these hazing kind of things that happened, right? In public school. This was in Cherokee, Oklahoma. And I was out after, it was sometime in the summer. Yeah, that's sometime in the summer before school started. There was a carload of kids pulled into our driveway, and I think I was on a horse out around the barn or something, and there was at least 5, 6 guys jump out of there, and they were going to come out there and give me a haircut, a freshman haircut. So they came out there and tried to chase me down on this horse. You know, I kind of knocked a couple of them down, just getting away from them. I didn't know what in the world. I had no idea what they were doing. And then the boss, ranch boss, shows up, and he starts tooting his horn and runs the guys off. Because actually we had already talked about the fact that I wasn't going to go to high school there in Cherokee. We had already decided we were going to make the application and all of that to come to school here. And like I say, finance was a consideration at that time. So it eased off the family, and I had always wanted to kind of get away and eat white man food, if you will, white bread and stuff like that, and see what it was like to have that kind of a meal on. So I came to Loop Hall right there and found out.
Okay. So you'd been around a lot of different Native kids at Murrow, but here you were coming to an all-Indian school at Chilocco too.
Yeah.
What were your first impressions when you got here?
I have to tell you, I was totally amazed at the number of different kinds of Indians that were here. I had no idea, to tell the truth. I mean, at Murrow, I was first and second grade. I didn't pay much attention to it. They were all just brown kids like me, so didn't really matter, and we were all speaking English. So it really wasn't a consideration of any kind. But when I got here, my God, we had kids from New York State to Washington State to Southern California to Florida and all the tribes in between. We numbered, I think, into 1,200 students or something like that living here in 6 homes. And then there was all the staff here as well. A lot of them were Indians of different kinds as well, who were instructors and or matrons or authority figures.
Well, going back to food, did you visit the bakery or get to sneak any milk or any of that stuff?
Actually, the bakery was the plum detail to get here. Everyone would get a detail every semester. And there's 4 semesters, right? Yeah, every semester you'd have a different detail. You either did halls in your dorm, or you worked at the laundry or the power plant, or in the kitchen here, or the bakery. And I never got a job at the bakery. Never got a detail over there. But if you worked in the kitchen, you had sort of access to the bakery, wherein when they would bring the like bread and they baked things over, like especially rolls and stuff like that. We were able to filch a few, if you had the right kind of clothes on, big baggy clothes with bags that you could put under there. So working in Loop Hall in the kitchen, peeling potatoes and all of the kitchen work, and actually washing pots and pans, huge pots and pans, that kind of, it had a perk in that you had access to the bakery.
Right. What about instructors that stood out for you at Chilocco?
Instructors. I think the larger part of my life, my attention wasn't so much on the instructors as it was toward the other students, more or less. Just part of being young, I guess. But I remember one teacher whose name I can't remember, but he had taught sociology. And this would have been probably in the 11th or 12th grades, I think. But one of the craziest things that I remember about he and his class was that, or him and his class, was that he took us to Winfield, Kansas, which is an insane asylum at the time. And it was a tour for students. My God, it was traumatic, man. I mean, you walked into hallways where people, extremely disturbed people, are in nightgowns, lined up on the floor, here and there, and just everywhere. And this was part of a sociology class. Oh my
goodness.
God! I thought, my God, that was practically traumatic, And I don't remember much more than just the sights and smells and everything of the place, And then one other instructor that I remember well, his name was Gregory, and he was also the commander of the 45th Division's Charlie Company up here, the National Guard. Well, one day, we were assigned reports to do on different tribes and on different peoples all over the world, and I had drawn, it was, I had drawn either Aztec, Inca, or it was some tribes to the south, and I had researched it to a pretty good degree, I thought, and I think I took a direct quote. If not, I'll be telling you a lie, but I think I took a direct quote from some research that I found about how they were described in as being a group of people with some queer rituals and ceremonies and stuff. And so I took my report and said, rather than just being, word for word from the research, I called them a group of ceremonially queer people. And this was in like sometime between 60 and 64, right. So that was like a verboten word, Right. And he stopped me right as soon as I said queer. You, in the corner. What? Yeah, in the corner. On one foot. So I had to like stick my nose into the corner there, lift one foot, and stand there for the remainder of the class for using the word queer. In terms of you know what really
Right.
queer means, right?
Right,
It's just
right,
kind of
right.
different, odd, strange, or
Right.
whatever. But no, it was used in the more colloquial, term
Right.
in his mind.
Oh my goodness.
Unfortunately, those are the kind of memories I have of teachers.
What was your areas? What were you studying? What did you decided was kind of your focus here while you were here?
Well, I have to say that in my own behalf is that I could have gone academic, but this is a vocational school. And at the 11th and 12th grades, you could decide if you wanted to go academic and pursue like prep classes and stuff, or you could take a vocation. I decided I would take a vocation, and I studied dry cleaning. They had some shops down here, and when I got there, I found out that this could be a source of income, because as students we were allowed to clean our own clothes there. So I thought, well, I don't have that many clothes, and so I'd do all my clothes down there, and then I'd have, an allotment of other pieces that I could do. So I started dry cleaning for other people, and they paid me less than what they had to pay to have their stuff cleaned, right? So I had a small side business going there.
Did you volunteer for the National Guard here while you were here?
I asked my parents when I was 17 if they would allow me to join the National Guard, because they got paid on a monthly basis, and they also got to march around the Oval on, I think it was once every, they'd have a meeting, the monthly meeting. What part of it was marching from the Armory down this way to the Oval. I think it was Sunday morning, something like that. And you'd have these guys that would be able to do that. Left, right, left, right, left, right, left, your left, left, your left, right, left. And all these Indian guys be kind of all really strutting their stuff out there in this uniform, starched uniform and everything. Hey, 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 hey. It was funny. And, and all the girls would come out and watch us. Yeah, so I joined that, and that, in a way, was the beginning of my military experience. What I did, and I don't recommend this, of course, the opportunity is not even there anymore, I don't think anymore, because of the all-volunteer Army, but what I did was I joined, and at that time, every young male citizen was obligated to 6 years of duty to the nation, right? And so I was actually unaware of all of that. I just wanted to march on the Oval and get paid every month, But in any case, upon graduation, we all loaded up and went to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and had 6 months training, which is the requirement. Basic training, AIT training, or advanced training, and then the remainder of something, about 6 months that we did. And then went home, and the requirement is every year you do 2 weeks at some camp or something, and then you attend meetings. Well, I became very slack after 2 years of doing that, and kind of forgot about it. And then about, at the time, would have been sometime in '67, I suppose, the Army activated me because they found that I hadn't been doing what I was supposed to do, going to meetings and stuff. But in any case, they activated me and sent me to Fort Benning, Georgia, and at that point I began to hear stories about Vietnam, mainly because this was like a holding company of people who were ready to ETS out of the Army. And they had all these different kinds of stories I'd listen to, really scary stuff, really funny stuff. Really, it just seemed like, wow, Vietnam, theater of war, a theater of combat. I wonder what I'd be like in that. You know, young male begins to think, wow, what would I be like? I could test myself, couldn't I? So I thought, okay. I went up to the office and said, I'd like to go to Vietnam. And I had just about a year left of my obligation. And so they said, okay, you're nuts, but okay. So they signed me up, and then within a short while, there I found myself in Vietnam. And served a year over there. And immediately upon completion of my year, it also completed my entire 6-year obligation. Totally out. It was quite an experience. I mean, I talked to some guys who have been there, and a lot of my old friends that wound up over there as well, but I never saw anybody I knew over there. But it was, I wouldn't give it up. It's an experience in terms of learning about yourself, as well as learning about the human condition and life around the world. I had, at that point, I had no idea what a third world country was like, you know. It sort of reminded me of my childhood in a way, you know. But yeah, it was quite an experience, and then so in '69 I got out, and it did have an experience. It had not experience. It had an effect on me, in that for at least 2 years I did nothing in terms of being constructive for myself or anything else. I didn't feel the need to do anything. Certainly didn't want to do anything. It was a matter of changing that culture that you live in, and it's sort of an adrenaline-fueled kind of lifestyle you have in a combat situation like that. Then you come back into you come back into peace, and sometimes it can be more difficult to deal with on a daily basis. So I just simply didn't do anything except drugs, maybe, you know, for a couple of years. And then after that, actually was when after a number of years, I decided that I could use the GI Bill to do my education and stuff like that, and I just sort of hopped along doing that, and I'm getting off. I'm rambling here. You can cut me off anytime.
Well, I was wondering, in terms of once you said I'd like to serve in Vietnam, what was the name of what unit did you go over with?
I went into the 9th Division Alpha Company, 3rd of 39th Infantry. So I served the entire tour as a rifleman, 11B10. My MOS was 11B10.
Okay.
Grunt.
Were there many other Indian guys in your?
No, there was actually there was one guy that I remember. He's Pima. They call themselves Tona Odom instead. Around south of Phoenix. He was he, and then a Mexican American, if you will. But we were the 3 darkest guys, except for the black guys in the company that I was in. So he and I were the only ones that were identifiably Indian in that. Geez, in the whole battalion, maybe, but that's the only ones I knew of.
Did you feel like, how did your Chilocco background kind of help prepare you for the military? Oh,
well, it's institutional. So I think it served me well, and that I knew how to make a bed. You had to keep your shoes shined, and that display of kind of stuff, the military display of your shined shoes and your bed that's tightened to the point you can make a quarter bounce on it or whatever, maybe a dime. I had inklings of that here at Chilocco. I mean, I'd learned all of that stuff, how to keep things clean, orderly, and how to keep your trunk packed just the right way, and how to dress and how to iron, how to wash your own clothes, and all. I had learned all of that stuff here, and still serves me well.
How about growing up in the country? Did you have any skills that you took from that into the service?
Any growing up in the well, I was familiar with weapons. All my life, weapons were around everywhere. They were just like stacked up here. It would scare people these days to see how there's a rifle over the door and leaning up against the closet or whatever. And nobody ever shot anybody, back in those days. But I don't know. Something's changed. But at that point in time, I think living a rural life is a good advantage for somebody going into the military as an infantryman, for sure. I had no idea what it's like to work behind a desk or anything like that.
Where did you land when you went to Vietnam? Where did you?
I believe it was Cam Ranh Bay. Cam Ranh Bay, and from there I went to, or maybe it was Tan Son Nhut, and then Cam Ranh Bay, and then we got placed into our permanent duty stations. And the first place I went out of Cam Ranh Bay in the 9th Division was to a place called the French Fort. And that's exactly what it was. It was an old French fort, and my company was bivouacked there for about maybe 3 to 4 weeks, something like that. By the time I got there, then they had that huge Tet offensive in May, the top of May. Well, actually, it wasn't the huge one. It was a smaller one. They called it the baby Tet. I think that's when VC pretty much, and NVA kind of overran a large part of Chinatown in what was then Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City. Our company was there. I think we were the brunt of it. The 9th Division's companies were the brunt of their assault on the Chinatown of it, and the bad part of all that was that I think most of the Chinese people that were segmented in that area were very friendly to the troops. But what happened was, I think the VC got in there, and that's where they were shooting from. That's why those were the areas that they were using the Chinese population as kind of a barrier, right? So they're being able to attack us through that, and so unfortunately the 9th Division's response was to destroy that part of town. I think that, I'm not totally sure, but I think the 9th Division was censured for that part of the war, in that they really devastated that entire segment of the. I think they were decommissioned or something like that after the fighting was over. But as I understand it, they're being recommissioned again or something like that. Maybe they need more troops somewhere in the world.
What did you think of your officers in Vietnam?
I think that we had to teach them very quickly. Once they got there, most of them the officers were almost straight out of OCS. Officers Candidate School, and they, while they had plenty of theory, we almost always were actually attached to and followed what the first sergeant said. You know, he had to work with his first sergeant, or platoon sergeant, and the platoon sergeant, who's an enlisted man, is actually the guy that we all adhere to. We just sort of salute the officer, unless, of course, you know, the smart ones would begin to learn from our platoon sergeants and know how to do things, because he's the one that was, the officer is the one, your platoon leader is that communicates with headquarters, right? So he has to make the decisions, but if he's smart, he's going to run them by the platoon sergeant first, because the platoon sergeant knows the men, he knows the terrain, and, you know, so the lieutenants, the second lieutenants that came in to lead us, if you will, had to learn quickly to adjust to the way that we did things, and then he was responsible for us, right? But the people that, the person that we as troops followed, of course, was almost always the enlisted guy.
How soon did you see combat after you got there?
It was very quickly. I landed there sometime in late April of '68, and that's after the big offensive in January, the Tet Offensive, and then that baby one is the one time that's where I began to see, and that was urban warfare, the worst kind in the world.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of the time was spent out in the paddies, which is was certainly not quite as dangerous. It's dangerous in its own way, because, you know, you get ambushed out there, or you have what were called booby traps and that kind of thing out there. But it's not nearly as surprisingly dangerous as urban warfare when you building to that kind of thing. Yeah, so we started off with a bang and kind of edged out in more rural stuff.
Right.
We went as far out as the Plain of Reeds over there I think we went into Cambodia a few times. Weren't supposed to, but what can you tell? How can you tell? It's the Plain of Reeds. It's nothing but reeds as far as you can see, and there's water that high, you know.
What was the closest call you had?
My closest call actually was from friendly fire. Friendly fire. And what it was, one evening we set up next to a little village that had a stream running right next to it, and right across the way there was a hog pen and several hogs in there, and so we set up there to go to sleep for the night, and I think I was either first or second, something like that, first or second for night watch, and that's when we had those night lights that were about this big around and about that long, and that's what you watched with because it's so dark, right? So you get a little bit of this, you see green vision, green images out there through this thing, and when on my watch, excuse me, those hogs started running around over there like something's happening. Oh, geez! So I started watching like that, but I wasn't quick enough. As you know, after I heard that, we got incoming fire, and so they had gotten in around those fires, and they started firing on us like that. But we fired back, and that wasn't really that bad. It just, you know, the fight went on for 4 or 5 minutes or something. It wasn't that long, but then they called in an airstrike. You know, the big choppers, the big gunships, and they got there pretty quickly. They got there. Well, you know, there was a firefight, and then there was a lull, and then they came in, and they started raining down what I think 50 calibers, and they so we had we really had no cover from the top, right? I mean, so everything just zoop, 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 zoop. We started hearing rounds coming in from the gunship, which didn't get quite the right coordinates, so they were firing down on us.
Oh my goodness.
And tracers I don't know however many, but every once in a while you see tracers coming down around you, left and right. And what do? You know, you move left, you move right. What? You know, it's an awful place to be. There's zip, 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 zip things coming down like that. I suppose that would be my closest call. But the good thing about it was that they hit us with a rocket. During that same attack, they hit us with a rocket, and it hit this adobe wall, if you will. It was a mud wall, actually. It hit that, and it sprayed everything, not only the shrapnel, but mud and mud cakes and all over them. And I think I'm pretty sure what I got hit with was a piece of dirt that hit my knee and knocked my kneecap off to one side. So, but it didn't cut anything. So that's why I think it was the dirt. So it knocked my kneecap off to one side, and then there's several other people got hit that night. Some either by the enemy or by friendly fire. Friendly fire, that's quite a term. But in any case, because of my knee, I got dusted off. I got dusted off. Oh, and I have to tell you, just between you and me, and for the rest of the world to see, that was an amazing trip for me, because they came in afterwards. They came in to look for the wounded, and the medics did, and so they saw my knee and they said, "Yeah, we got to dust you off." So they put me on a carrier and put me into the helicopter like that, and they said, "You're in pain." So they gave me a shot of morphine and lifted off. Oh my God, that was the most beautiful night of my life. Here, my kneecap is halfway around my knee, but I'm laying there and I can look up and I can see the universe of stars out there, and I'm affected by morphine, feel no pain, and I'm rising above all of that havoc, all of that stuff going on down on the earth, and it was like escape into heaven.
Right. So did you have to have a surgery, and then how long were you?
What did they do? They know.
Maybe they just
we got
moved it
there.
back.
I think they just knocked it back over and then taped it up, and I stumbled around for maybe a week or two, something like that. I think so. I had easy duty for a little while there, and then they said it's okay now. Sent me back out on the line.
Did your friend make it out? Do you know? He didn't.
And the sad part is, the day that he died, we were in a little village called Rockeen, and it was an actual little town made up of board sidewalks and what would seem to look like a movie set kind of a town or something, you know. But no, it was totally used, kind of it was functional. It was a little village. But one day, I think we were all we were down. We weren't doing anything, and I went walking down the sidewalk next to the stores and stuff, and I saw him up ahead, and he had strapped on his .45, and he was kind of walking around down there, and I said, something started a conversation, but and this was kind of, I don't know, morning or midday thereabouts, and he had been drinking. He was out of it, you know. And he looked at me and he said, he didn't even hear what I said, but he looked at me. He said, remember the golden key. Okay. And I went on about my business, and about 30 minutes later, he had taken his .45 and blew his head off.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty bad. And I never could understand why. But he didn't talk a lot either, so I didn't really know him in terms of beyond.
Do you stay in touch with some of your veteran friends, or have you? I don't know if you've spent much time with veterans organizations since. Or?
Not with the organizations, no. But I do stay in touch with two guys on a fairly regular basis. One works and lives in Las Vegas, Louis, and then another one back east. Used to be in Rhode Island, but now he's in Connecticut. Not far, but he was from Rhode Island. And when I first got out, I was living in Tulsa for a number of months, and decided I wanted to take a trip, and where I would go would be back east. So I got names of some of my guys that I was over there with, and I found in the local paper an advertisement for driver needed. We'll take car from Tulsa, Oklahoma to, I think it was Baltimore. Perfect. And so I applied. Went to some house and they said, you got a driver's license? Can you drive? Can you make it to Baltimore in so many days? Yeah. Okay, so don't bother the boxes in the back. Okay. So drove off to Baltimore, and from there I went to New York and found one guy that was over there with us and hung around for a week or so, and then I went up to Rhode Island, Providence. That's where he lived, and his Portuguese. He's a Portuguese guy, and they have just a little different idea. At least at that time, he and his family had a little different idea of family structure and stuff. You know, they're extended family. You know, and they very welcoming of me and asked me if I, you know, we can give you this room here. You know, stay here as long as you want. You're Wally's friend, and then. After a while, I, you know, just living there more or less, doing what the family does and learning Providence, Rhode Island, or an urban living like that. He said, "You want to get a job?" Yeah, sure. So he had friends in the business of yarn. So he got me, he helped me get a job working in a yarn factory. So I did that for about a month or so, and I finally decided, well, okay, this is fun, but I think I'd rather go home. But I got to live in Providence for a while and actually even work and make money, you know, with my buddies. And so those two I've kept up with, and then through them I hear about other guys, you know, at least maybe half a dozen.
So you haven't made a lot of Chilocco reunions, but the ones that you make, why are they important to you?
That's a good question, Julie. I really don't know why they're important. They're enjoyable in different ways. You know, you come to see the place, and it stirs up old memories of this and that, and a lot of the buildings are gone or almost ruined, but their memories remain just as if it were yesterday, right, or even right now. A lot of the things changed, but it was a huge part of my life, and whether I admit it or not, I think I was able to learn some good lessons here. I learned some skills. I learned how I learned how to deal with people in a certain way, and learned a lot about the outside world, and it was a good experience. It had its bad moments, but that's life, right? I mean, not everything works out well on a daily basis, hourly basis, but good times, bad times. I tend to remember about this place just as much as the good times as the bad. So it's a part of my life, so it has to be important, right?
Right.
I can't define it.
Well, what would you like people to know or remember about either Chilocco or about wartime service? What it's like?
Well, I think about wartime service, I think that one day we should all learn that it is the absolute last resort to any kind of, it's not an answer to anything really when it comes down to it. When you actually experience the horrors, the vagaries of a combat situation, I think you would find it very hard to say that that war is an option. I'd really like for people to learn that it's not an option anymore. I don't think it does any good, and it leaves a lot of people broken one way or another, either physically, mentally. It's not a. I'd like people to know that war is a bad thing, and not to engage in it anymore. But I had my doubts. As far as Indian education goes, I'm glad that the tribes and pueblos and the indigenous people have begun to take over and run their own schools in a better way to help prepare people to live in the modern world.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for your time and thank you for your service too.
My pleasure.